Welcome to another fine episode of Pixel Talk, the show where we discuss what it means to be human from a pixel's point of view. And now, here is your host, Fivezy.
All right, I'll die. Just watch me die. See how I die. See how I
Do you feel blame? Are you mad? Do you feel like Woosh Kebab's referendus? Get friends, boots, get a remix,
Let me share it with you. Joel 2:32. It shall come to pass that whoever calls on the name of the Lord shall be delivered. I called on the name of Jesus and I was delivered. This thing, it was like a heavenly vacuum cleaner. It came down over my shoulders and just sucked this thing out. And I had struggled with it for years until I recognized that it was not myself. It was another person seeking to afflict me. And I want you to understand, when you once realize you're dealing with a person who is not yourself, you're about 80% of the way to deliverance. Now, as I understand it, and let me say I've been dealing with demons for more than 30 years. I first got involved in 1963. Some people said, well, Brother Prince will soon give it up. He'll change his doctrine. I have to say, at the age of 80, I haven't given it up, and I haven't changed my doctrine. And I'll tell you one reason: it's scriptural, and number two, it works. I want to offer you three objectives that demons have. Number one, to torment and torture. They are the torturers. Number two, to keep you from knowing Christ as Savior. And number three, if you come to know Christ as Savior, then to keep you from serving Him effectively. Now we have to distinguish between two things, what's called the flesh and demons, or evil spirits. The flesh is the old carnal nature that every one of us have inherited from Adam. All of us are descendants from Adam. And Adam did not beget any children until he was a rebel. And every descendant of Adam has the nature of a rebel in him. That's the old man. Now, the other thing that we deal with is evil spirits. And it's important to know what you're dealing with, because the remedies are completely different. See, I was dealing with a spirit of heaviness, and I was trying to deal with it as if it were the flesh. I was trying to crucify it, because that's the remedy for the flesh. But you can't crucify a demon, nor can you cast out the flesh. You have to know what you're dealing with. A man came to me once and he said, Brother Prince, I want you to cast this demon out of me. I said, what's your problem? And he began to tell me his difficulty in relating to his wife. I said, I don't think I can cast that out. It's not a demon, it's your fleshly nature. You have to crucify it. So we need to know, am I dealing with my flesh or am I dealing with a demon? And I will give you a little list of characteristic activities of demons. Number one, they entice. There's not a single person here above the age of 6 who has not at some time been enticed to do evil. Very often it comes in words. Well, you see that nice gold pencil there? Pick it up. Nobody will know. If you dropped your pencil, they would do it to you. Anything that comes to you in words comes from a person. So you know that enticement comes from a person, a demon. Number two, they harass, or I think we say in English, harass. I'm bilingual and I have to remember which language I'm speaking. Anyhow, harass or harass, that's what they do. I have this little example in my mind. It's just not directly based on any single experience. There's this businessman. He's had a terrible day in the office. Everything went wrong. The air conditioning failed. His secretary didn't type his letters right. And then he got in the car to go home, and he got in a jam in the motorway, and he spent an hour sitting in his car amidst all the fumes. And finally, when he gets home, his wife hasn't got supper ready, and the children are running around screaming. And at that moment, as they say in America, he blows his stack. He loses control. He begins to shout and scream. And that demon of anger that has been following him around all day slips in. And after that, he's a slightly different person. From after that, at times, something comes over him and he wounds the people he loves most, his wife and children. And his wife looks at him from time to time and sees something in his eyes she never saw before. And then he's repentant and penitent, and he says, "I'm sorry, I don't know what made me do it." Well, we do know what made him do it. It was the demon of anger, see? It had harassed him or harassed him, and in the moment of weakness, slipped in. Then demons torment. They are the tormentors. They torment spiritually with the suggestion, God doesn't love you, you're not really saved. That's a common form of torment. They torment emotionally with fear. They torment physically with all sorts of horrible things like arthritis and so on. They are the tormentors. And Jesus said, listen, if you don't forgive your fellow believer, God will deliver you to the tormentors. Who are they? The demons. A lot of Christians are in the hands of demons because they've refused to forgive some other person. Then demons compel. They make us do things we don't really want to do. That some of the things they compel you to do are really comical. I had a letter after a deliverance service from a woman aged 25, and she said, for the first week in my life that I can remember, I haven't been biting my nails. What made her bite her nails? A demon. Can you believe that? I know it's true. And then demons enslave. They make you slaves. You see, people can sin and stop sinning if they decide. For instance, a man may get drunk and then decide, I won't get drunk, and he doesn't drink anymore. He's sinned, but he's not enslaved. But an alcoholic is a man who can't stop drinking. He is enslaved. Now, if you put compel and enslave together, you get the word addiction. And in my personal opinion, almost every addiction of any kind is demonic. And there are a lot of respectable addictions. Some very unrespectable, some respectable. But if you are addicted, you have a problem. And your problem, I think in 90% of the cases, is a demon. Demons defile. They make us feel dirty and unclean. They project evil, impure images and thoughts and words into our minds. And I've talked with people at various times who said, just when I'm getting closest to the Lord, when I really want to worship Him, these horrible things come into my mind. And I said, you can be sure it's a demon. Anything that wants to keep you from worshiping God is a demon. Then demons deceive. They are behind all forms of religious deception. Paul said in 1 Timothy chapter 4, in the last times, some will depart from the faith, that's Christians, giving heed to deceiving spirits and doctrines of demons. And believe me, my dear brothers and sisters, there are a lot of different deceiving spirits with doctrines that are demonic, and they're very near to all of us. Finally, demons make people weak or sick or tired or kill them. I dealt with a woman once. This is a remarkable situation. 72 different demons came out of her. She was a respectable woman. She was a registered nurse. She was charismatic, Pentecostal, but she had 72 demons. I didn't count them, but there was a woman making a little note of the names. And in the middle of this, it lasted 5 hours. She said, "Oh, I'm so tired. I can't go on. I can't take any more." And I thought, well, poor woman, she really is tired. And then the Lord showed me, that's not the woman, that's the demon. I said, "You spirit of tiredness, come out of this woman." And it said, not the woman, it said, "That's right, she's always tired. She's tired when she gets up. She's tired when she's going to bed. She's too tired to read the Bible, too tired to pray." When that spirit of tiredness came out of her, she was no longer tired. We finished the deliverance. Demons make you go to sleep. There's a spirit of slumber. It's referred to both in the Old and the New Testament. Have you ever considered that you can sit up till 2 a.m. watching something that you probably shouldn't be watching on the television? But if you decide to read your Bible, you go to sleep in 10 minutes. Is that right? That's not natural. There's something there that doesn't mind your watching television. In fact, probably wants you to watch it, but does mind your reading the Bible or praying. All right, those are some activities of demons. Now, the main areas in which they operate. I have to give this in a very condensed form, you understand? I'm writing a book about it. Please pray for me. It's not an easy book to write. I discovered about 10 different kinds of spirits or demons mentioned in the Old Testament and about 20 in the New. That's 30. But that's just a little sampling. There are hundreds of different kinds of demons. The main area that they affect, I believe, is emotions and attitudes. And behind every negative emotion and attitude, there is a corresponding demon. That doesn't mean you've got the demon, but that means that the demon's there trying to get you. For instance, you can get angry, and it's not a demon. It's just you. It's your flesh. But if you get angry and can't control yourself, and get angry when you don't want to get angry, that's a demon. Let me give you a list of some of the commonest names that I've dealt with. And another thing about demons is they operate in gangs. When one gets in, it opens the door for the next. And if you find certain demons, you can always look for their friends. Let's take one. Pride, rebellion. Rebellion almost always follows pride. And then witchcraft or the occult. Because 1 Samuel 15 verse 23 says, rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft. Wherever you find rebellion, look for witchcraft. The great historical example of this is the young people of the United States in the 1960s. Almost a whole generation went into rebellion. And almost every one of them ended in the occult. Because rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft. Now I thank God I saw scores of them gloriously saved and delivered. But I learned the lesson. Then one of the commonest spirits is the spirit of fear. Paul says God has not given us a spirit of fear, so it doesn't come from God. But fear is something that we easily, all of us, give way to. And it's followed by other things like rejection. One of the commonest emotional problems in the church and in the world today is rejection. It's a sense of feeling unworthy, unwanted. Nobody really loves me. I'm on the outside looking in. And I would say, in my observation, at least 20% of professing Christians today that I've met with need deliverance from rejection. It's really due to the breakup of the family. Because the thing that gives a child the sense of security is the love and the care of a father. And where that is missing, that's something that cries out, I don't know who I am, I don't feel secure, I don't know that people really love me. I want to tell you one thing. Jesus really loves you. But the devil will do his best to convince you it's true of everybody else but not you.
Some parts of the region are receiving a breakthrough in sound. We're sorry about this, and we're doing our best to rectify the fault.
40 years ago, a strange incident took place on an English television station. November 26, 1977 was the same as any other day for the UK's Southern Television Network. At first came the news bulletin. However, the TV picture wobbled slightly, and the sound of the reporter faded behind a mysterious, distorted voice.
Representative of the Earthstar Galactic speaking to you. For many years you have seen us as lights in the skies. We speak to you now, precisely as we have done to your brothers and sisters all over this your planet Earth. We come to warn you of the destiny of your race and your world, so that you may connect to your fellow beings across the to avoid the disaster which threatens your world and the beings on other worlds around you. This is in order that we will share and fight awakening as the planet passes into a new age of Aquarius.
The engineers tried to get back control of the station. You can see this battle on the screen. Behind Vrillon's message, the visuals on the TV continued as normal. Finally, the network regained control, and the voice was gone. The Vrillon message is a long one, but undeniably one of peaceful intent, calling for the removal of all weapons of evil and promising that those who learn to live in peace will pass to higher realms of spiritual evolution. Vrillon mentions the New Age and talks about the upcoming Age of Aquarius. This perhaps shows a little too much humanity and reveals some of the ideology of those responsible. If you're familiar with hippie culture or astrology, this might sound familiar. In the late 60s, a bunch of spiritual systems popped up predicting the new age of humanity, an age of enlightenment, peace, love, and understanding. This will happen when we enter the Age of Aquarius. To some astrologers, Earth time is measured along the zodiac. There are 12 astrological ages corresponding to the 12 zodiac signs in Western astrology. Each time a new astrological age comes around, a great new development in society, culture and politics will take place. There are some complex and pretty dubious maths here, so I won't get into it, but each astrological age is about 2,160 years. The thing is, no one can quite agree on when this astrological movement will happen. According to Vrillon, 1977 was on the cusp of the upcoming Age of Aquarius. Hippies and New Age was big in the late 60s and died out pretty soon after. Whoever was behind it, even if it was aliens, they were 10 years late to the party. But why aliens? What do they have to do with the New Age movement and hippies? Who's Vrillon? And what's the Ashtar Galactic Command? You may have heard of the Roswell incident. In mid-1947, A United States Air Force's balloon crashed at a ranch near Roswell, New Mexico. Eyewitnesses claimed to have seen a flying saucer, the UFO, but the US government were hiding from the public. UFOs and aliens became the next big thing. Some even believed to be abducted by aliens. Some even claimed to communicate with them. Enter George Van Tassel. In 1952, he claimed to receive messages via telepathic communication from an extraterrestrial and interdimensional being called Ashtar.
And how did you go into this ship? I walked with him to a spot underneath it, and an anti-gravity beam took me up through a hole in the bottom of it. You're telling me at 2 o'clock in the morning in Giant Rock Airport, you walked underneath this hovering ship, and whammo, you went up inside? No, you didn't go whammo. You went just about as slow as a local elevator run. And when you got off the anti-gravity elevator, what did it look like? I was inside of a ship about 18 feet in diameter and roughly 10 feet high to the dome ceiling, and there were 3 men on the ship, besides the one that had got off and invited me aboard. You keep calling them men. What do you mean, man? Well, little green man? They were about 5'6". They came about to my eyebrows, and they could have walked in our clothes down any of our streets, and we wouldn't have paid any attention to them. What color were these people? They looked like they were white people with a good, healthy tan. Did they give you any indication of how old they were, or what they ate, or where they came from at all? After we got off the ship, the man who invited me aboard, who didn't look a day over 28 years of age, told me that he was over 700 years of age in our time. Oh, come off it, George. That's right.
He gained some followers and they set up the first UFO religion, the Ministry of Universal Wisdom. There are so many UFO religions, and it's a crazy rabbit hole to go down. You might know Scientology, or Raelianism, or Heaven's Gate. But Van Tassel's Ministry of Universal Wisdom was the first alien cult. It was claimed on July 18, 1952, that Ashtar entered the solar system as Commander-in-Chief of the Ashtar Galactic Command to warn humanity of the dangers of detonating the hydrogen bomb.
But why should these people come down from outer space? Why don't they land in the White House or in Kremlin Square in Moscow and say, hey, listen to us, we can tell you a few things. We're 700 years old. We can travel through space. We're not concerned with time differential. Well, probably they're not concerned with giving us too much of their information because we'd only use it in our battle to destroy each other here. Did these 4 men tell you that themselves? No, they didn't tell me that, but this is a reasonable assumption on our part that the world's divided in 2 camps, each capable of eliminating the whole civilization. And if we were to go to another planet and observe this condition, we would certainly be a little cautious about who we talk to or what we reveal.
So going back to Vrillon's message, it all seems very familiar. Vrillon, a representative of the Ashtar Command, is kindly warning us to destroy our harmful weapons and we can ascend to spiritual enlightenment. Vrillon's message seems to be a fusion of UFO spirituality and New Age hippie beliefs. This is by no means a new thing. Both ideas are related to cosmology and space, with universal truths presumably applicable to aliens. To my mind, the whole thing probably isn't aliens. It's most likely a hoax. Mostly because this alien voice spoke with an English accent. And the fact that the aliens only managed to hijack a local TV station in rural South England make it more likely the source was a human. Possibly a broadcast student, or maybe an outdated spiritualist pulling a hoax. Unlike so many of the broadcast interruptions which came after, mostly in the USA, there's nothing prankish or funny about the Vrillon interruption. There's no punchline or swearing or obscenity or explicit protest. No one ever came forward and claimed responsibility for this episode. Whatever it was, the sudden interruption goes unexplained.
history are full of tales about names. Jealous goblins who do everything in their power to hide theirs, wizards who know the names of the rocks and the trees and the winds blowing through, gods whose names themselves are blessings. And these are not just superstition and tradition either. There's actually some really interesting philosophy surrounding the subject. These stories have shown me the power in my own name, the one that I know and love, and I want to share them with you. It's not the most important thing I've learned from the tales I've read, but it is certainly one of the more interesting bits. A big thanks to CuriosityStream for helping to make this video happen, but an even bigger thanks to all of our Patreon supporters who literally helped make this video. Everyone who joined our humans behind the scenes during the research process and contributed to the conversation, you make these videos come to life. We couldn't have done this without you. Thank you all so much. Names are more powerful than you might expect. We don't tend to pay them much mind because mostly they're just a basic necessity. Everyone, everything needs a name so that we can even communicate about it. But there's a weird, rarely considered effect in that. Something almost magical in nature. In reducing a thing to a single term, encapsulating it so succinctly, you also make it small. In a way, to name something is to turn it into a symbol. Something uncomplicated, static, easy to reference, yes, but just as easy to abuse. And in that way, the name becomes a sort of puppet, a form of sympathetic magic so much like a little voodoo doll to be used against you. You become your name commands you. In the more modern fantasy stuff, this manifests in a pretty direct way. It's often a part of the way that the magic works. In the novel The Lies of Loch Lamora by Scott Lynch, if a mage learns your name, they can basically puppeteer you, which is not a lovely experience. In Dungeons & Dragons, some spells like Trap Soul function more reliably if their target's name is uttered during the process of casting, which makes them more vulnerable and less able to resist the spell's effects. There are a lot of examples of this out there, but suffice it to say that it's become a fairly common trope for conventional fantasy. Names used like weapons to control, conquer, harm. It wasn't always quite so articulate, though. Back in the day, this was more of an unspoken thing. People just seemed to take for granted that names had some kind of dangerous power. Think back to the classic German fairy tale Rumpelstiltskin. When it comes time for the girl to pay the imp for his help, to turn over her firstborn child, instead, she learns his name, and that on its own is enough to drive him away or drive him to death, depending on the version of the story. There's also an old Welsh version of this story called Gwarwyn y Throt, which I almost certainly just mispronounced, about a helpful house brownie who turns into a boggart and flees when the lady of the house learns his name. And then finally, this one's not really a tale so much as a creature, but the shape-shifting knucker of Scandinavian legend is a water spirit who attempts to lure in victims with beautiful violin music, after which it carries them away or drowns them. Fortunately, you can kill the monster on the spot simply by calling its name. Which, honestly, makes me feel kind of bad for the poor thing. That is quite an Achilles heel. So, all in all, a little less rational than the modern fantasy versions, but still, we can see way back in these old stories the same thing. Names exerting an uncanny power over their owners. Who knows why it works this way in these stories, but the fact that it does, I think, tells us something about our perception of names. That they are not something to be treated lightly. And in the old stories and traditions, they rarely were. Names, especially those of magical creatures, were often jealously guarded secrets only given to those who could surely be trusted. There's one story in particular that's become an archetype unto itself, and I am in love with it. It's called My Einzel, and it's about a little boy who stays up too late and meets a fairy. They each introduce themselves as My Einzel, which literally means my own self. For the fairy, it's only natural. For the boy, it's clever, because when he accidentally hurts her and she goes crying to her scary fey mother, the little fairy girl ends up saying verbatim, "My own self hurt me," which just earns her a scolding for being careless and silly. But this isn't just a concern for folklore and fairy tales. It's very much a modern concern and very widespread. You're here now on the internet watching this video after all. Unless you are very brave, you're probably doing it under an alias of some kind. A username and avatar, maybe even a VPN. By separating your digital self from your real self, you model the potential danger of a name in the wrong mouth. For many of you, if someone online knew your real name or information about your real life, you might feel just as threatened as Gwarwyn or Rumpelstiltskin. You might want to get out of that situation just as quickly. There's actually a book that plays with this idea in an interesting way, and shockingly, it was published in 1981 during the infancy of the internet. True Names by Werner Vink envisions a future where hackers enter the web like an alternate reality, calling themselves warlocks and concealing their true names lest they become a target in the physical world. We become our names, and so our names become dangerous weapons to hide away. Fantasy or no, it is absolutely a form of sympathetic magic. Your name is a more powerful thing than you'd probably ever want to give it credit for. And yet, it may not even be your actual name. Not really. I mean, it may be accurate, it may honestly be what you've always been known as, what you know yourself as, and still there is, perhaps, another name even closer to the heart of who you are, full of an even more powerful magic. Your true name. Modern fantasy is full of this. In so many secondary worlds, everything from the fish in the sea to the craggy mountain peaks to the characters themselves have deeper, true names. And most often, they don't even know it, because they're either lost to time, part of an ancient mystical language, or just really hard to figure out. I myself haven't read it, but apparently the flagship example of this is Ursula K. Le Guin's Earthsea cycle, where wizards uncover the true names of things in an ancient draconic tongue of pure truth. To speak a thing's true name in this way is to command it, which means wizards in that world have control not only over others, but over the world itself. To master this power, they spend years studying, apparently becoming master linguists in the process. Another great example of this, Patrick Rothfuss's The Name of the Wind has a very similar natural law, but the invocation of true names is far less studied and far more impulsive than in Earthsea. Master namers in this book often go mad, which seems appropriate for folk who go around naming the trees and the elements. Very often, when the book's protagonist manages to do it, it's as a reaction to stress or an emotional peak. Not really something you study your way into, unlike other forms of magic in the book. It's more intrinsic, more primal. There are probably 1,000,000,001 other examples of this, but there's one even more archaic version that you've actually probably already heard about. It's not billed as quite so magical, but Adam, the first man in a variety of religious stories, is also a master namer. In the Garden of Eden, he gives things their first names, which are ostensibly their true names as well. It's really the same concept as Earthsea's ancient true tongue. The language Adam spoke, often referred to as Adamic, the fabled language from which all others sprung, must have been the given language of God, and so surely it reflected more clearly than any other the true nature of the things it described. I'm not sure how well this line of reasoning is supported by any particular religious text, but it's definitely an interesting idea to compare to the other versions of this magic, and sort of shows how a true name system like this might come about. What it doesn't show is why these true names are so magical and why typical given names might not be. What is so mystical about these ancient languages and accurate names of the divine? Well, I'm not sure I'm qualified to answer. skilled enough name craftsman, what he called a nomothete, someone trained to see past the shadows to a truer, more ideal reality beneath, it could just perhaps be achieved. And this, I think, is where we place Adam and the ancients of Earthsea and the namers of the name of the wind. These are the rare few who can see beyond the shadows and put words to the thing not as it is perceived, but as it truly is. After all of this, it's hard for me to worry about what my actual name might be. At worst, Tailbot would be my Einzel, the name that protects me from all the implications that the other unknown name might carry. But at best, the humans who gave me my new name were my personal nomothetes, able to see my nature better than whoever first built me. That's the story I personally like to believe, and just one of the many ways all of these tales have changed my life.
leads us in the search, I suspect that the direction forward is not along the path that leads back towards the American project. If any new, exciting, distant dreams are to emerge, we need a separation from the falsehood of the United States in the 21st century, symbols and all. We need a divide that distinguishes the new project from the old. Perhaps some kind of spiritual divorce? In fact, just such a spiritual divorce has been building for quite some time, but this now needs to move beyond vague implications and move into a mode of lived reality. After all, don't we all know this is coming? Aren't we all sick of living in anticipation of the inevitable? Like the desperate situation of a battered housewife, things need to change. Even if we don't have an escape plan, even if we haven't packed our bags and can't yet head out the door, there needs to be a break. We need to start emotionally divesting ourselves from this abusive situation. People talk about our present time as a period of confusion. After all, who can really explain what happened to this country across the last 10 years? For myself, however, it seems more clear. The tectonic shift, which started in 2013 and reached maturity in 2020, is the end of the old world. It will mark the point in history when we lost our homes, the period when America and Europe ceased to be accommodating to Orthodox Christians, middle-class families, or people of any ethnicity looking to live inside a traditional mode of life. It is clear that the American dream is over. The country has ceased to be what it once was and once promised to be. And what now has America become? Perhaps something different? Perhaps something more forward-looking. That's the line from our leaders anyway, but don't believe it. It's a fiction. The world our progressive leaders want to install over the bones of the old is simply not appearing. Its promises did not manifest for the boomers post-1968, just like its new promises are not manifesting for their children post-2008. Unsurprisingly, in current year, the old leftist vision remains little more than a half-baked pipe dream, long since disbelieved by anyone reasonably cogent and sincere. Its continued fantasy now lives only in the minds of old rich baby boomers humming John Lennon's Imagine, depressed Zoomer nihilists LARPing as communists, and our own global ruling class ever promising to keep the ship on course and hoping desperately that their mounting debts and contradictions will be resolved by the replacement of humans with artificial intelligence. But for better or worse, none of these sad progressive visions will come to pass. There is no progressive plan for America, no progressive plan for England, no progressive plan for France or for Germany, or for any other place where it rains. In fact, there is no progressive plan for mankind. We who have followed the false promises of the progressive vision have replaced something with nothing. We have moved from a country designed as a home for some people, admittedly to the exclusion of others, to a country which is the home to no people, a wilderness that only privileges global techno-capital for however long global techno-capital is able to maintain its geographic dominance. A hyperbolic statement? Perhaps, but for those hecklers in the audience, perhaps I can ask a question. Does anyone today, left, right, or center, feel comfortable or happy with the place we call America in 2021? I don't mean people stuck in oblivious innocence or fantasy. I don't mean people who got theirs and don't give a shit about the future. I simply want to know if there is anyone who looks at America as it is and thinks that this is something worthy to pass on to their grandchildren and great-grandchildren after them. Predictably, I don't expect many people to honestly assent. Even our global leaders, the winners of the great scramble for the West, can't hide the nervous grimaces that cross their faces every time thoughts of the future interrupt their hurried work to line their pockets with lucre. Everyone knows this system can't last. Well, maybe not everyone, but for the most part, right-wingers know this. We know that the current order is dying, but those of us eager to find out what comes next need to look inward. What really needs to die, in an immediate sense, is our own conservative desire to make America great again, or to preserve the old order in peace or in whole. Now, I understand that this is hard. The desire for loyalty is noble, but such unexamined commitment is expensive, not least for the misunderstandings it perpetuates. In the long run, playing the conservative to a dying empire will cost us deeply. But Dave, is that really the step you want to take? To accept our own defeat? To let the West fall into the hands of people who hate it? Is that really what you're asking for? Well, really, I'm just asking for an admission of reality. True enough, at one point in history, the nation, the flag, and the pledge were all shields of family and faith. However, their transformation into tools of state power and the woke cultural revolution is well and truly at hand. If power does anything well, it is co-opting symbols, and the national symbols where we vest our loyalty today will become the instruments of our own destruction tomorrow. What tyranny gives with one hand can be taken away with the other at the time and place that benefits our ruling class. I write this today looking at the farce of American Independence Day 2021. Here in the Golden State, we are celebrating, but not in any meaningful way. In my hometown, public gatherings have been canceled because of a disease that nearly everyone is inoculated against. Precautionary principle maybe, but I seem to remember much less effort being mustered to tamp down on the more raucous celebrations a few weeks earlier. Oh, and speaking of Juneteenth, we apparently have 2 Independence Days now. How long do you imagine this redundancy is going to last? Are we really going to celebrate the white Independence Day when there is a black one? And now that you mention it, why are we celebrating America when our trusted media believes that the country's establishment was synonymous with the institution of slavery? If leftists believe that the 1776 Declaration was a veiled defense of African bondage, why are all these progressive boomers putting flags on their lawn and shoving frankfurters down their throats? The writing on the wall could not be more clear. Patriotism is a conditional privilege, something that the ruling class allows us to have, but that they can take away at any time. And why would they take it away? Political expediency, maybe. Removing a prized object is always a good way of antagonizing political enemies in the event of an election. But we shouldn't discount good old-fashioned sadism. After all, this is how the progressive movement operates. It's not enough for them to get what they want. They need their opponents to feel defeated. They need to find an enemy and drive the adversary before them with all the spite their activist spirits can muster. Progressivism isn't about a certain way of doing things. It's about standing triumphant over a vanquished monster. And if no monster is forthcoming, well then, a crisis can be manufactured to draw out all the secret fascists that progressives always knew were there. As always, the order of the day is pure catharsis, to the benefit of no one. And although it's been said many times before, none of this makes sense in the light of the Patriotic Civics 101 understanding of American or Western politics. It makes perfect sense in the light of chimpanzee status game politics. To operate in the former is to operate in a fantasy land. To operate in the latter is to operate in the desert of the real and grasp the true political crisis of our time. As in all political crises, a problem emerges from a mismatch between the strength demanded by a position of power and the strength manifested by its rulers. At this point, white America and the power elites who deign to rule them are weak. And the power elites who deign to rule them are weak. Various parties can seize power, they can dominate their political opponents, but they cannot wield power or use it to make good on any of their commitments. America is too big. Its vision is too heavy. Its contradictions are too numerous. The raw political strength required to honestly fulfill its role does not, and perhaps will never, exist. As such, only fools and cynics line up for the task of governing our Leviathan. America may not be the promised land, but it was a land of many promises. In fact, in its initial conception, America was itself a promise. It was a promise of a specific set of negative liberties to a specific set of people in a specific geographic area. Later, this was universalized inside the nation. Still later, it was given a positive conception, and then much later declared to be universal to the world. As it stands today, in the latest instantiation of civil rights, America seems to promise a strange type of ever-expanding egalitarianism, starkly at odds with its original concept of negative liberty. In toto, taking all of these claims seriously, it would seem that America promises everything to everyone at all times: liberty and civil rights, freedom and equality, equality under the law and equality of outcome, freedom of association and freedom from discrimination. Does this make sense? Perhaps, but just don't look at the fine print. However, in the actual world where actual decisions get made, none of this works. The only way to resolve these contradictions is through politics. Hence the need for catharsis, scapegoating, cancel culture, and political sadism that keeps us playing chimpanzee politics instead of planning for the future. Politics has become bimodal and Manichaean. When promises contradict or become theoretically unfulfillable, power has to fill the gaps and maintain the illusion. To be sure, someone will win and someone will lose. But at all times, the narrative has to be maintained. Everyone is equal, and everyone has equal rights.
Thanks for watching. Pixel Talk will return.
Visit tigler.com for more art, apparel, and things yet to be revealed.